In his final book, Senator John McCain discussed his last days and wrote about his final moments on Earth, saying he will, quote, take my leave, bound for a place near my old friend Chuck Larson in the cemetery on the Severn, back where it began. This weekend, Senator McCain is bound for Annapolis, where he will be laid to rest beside Admiral Chuck Larson, his one-time friend at the U.S. Naval Academy. Joining me now is the family of the late Admiral Chuck Larson, his wife Sarah Larson, and his daughters Kristen Larson-Datko and Erica Larson. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. I know this is an emotional and difficult weekend for you all in many ways. Sarah, tell me about your husband and tell us about the remarkable, long friendship he had with John McCain.
Oh my goodness, it just goes back so far with so many memories. I knew John before I actually married my husband in 1961. And we've kind of followed each other through the years, John and Chuck. And even though their paths kind of changed, whereas Chuck went submarines and John went aviation, they always stayed in touch, They were very, very dear friends, and we certainly miss them.
You know, it strikes me, yes, they were both in the Navy for so long and lived that life for so long, yet they had so many differences. John McCain was, what, fifth from bottom of the class, and Admiral Larson, I think, was the president of the class. There's a big gap of like several hundred Naval Academy students between the two. Yet, Erica, I think it's so fascinating. Senator McCain revered your father. One of the things he said, I can think of no finer example of honorable service to our nation than the service of Chuck Larson has provided so faithfully and so well for so many years. It has been a privilege and an honor as a young man and an old man to serve in Chuck's shadow. That's from Senator McCain, Erica.
Well, that is lovely, but I have to tell you, my dad felt the exact same way about him. And even though they were completely on opposite ends in the class, they had a lot of similarities. They really were thoughtful, principled leaders. And at the same time, they also both knew how to have a lot of fun and had a great sense of humor. So it's no surprise to me that they would end up best friends.
Kristen, talk to me about those qualities your sister was just mentioning that they both had together. What would they be?
Integrity, dedication to service, honesty, love their country, honor, every good quality you could think of. I mean, stand up individuals.
And Sarah,
I don't find that anymore.
You know, John McCain was a U.S. Senator. His father, his grandfather are buried at Arlington. So it was an interesting choice to go back to Annapolis. And I know Annapolis is a place that was so important to your husband, twice the superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy. What do you think the draw was to both of them?
I think it's back to the beginning.
Yeah.
That's where it all began. And their love of service and their love of country. And it, I think, really instilled in them, you know, the America's promise and what it can be in the world as a guiding light.
And Sarah, your husband died, it was 4 years ago, 2014. 4 years ago. So I know in a lot of ways this has got to be a tough weekend for you. Yes, you've lost a friend in John McCain that you've known for a long time as well, but it must be a moment where you go back and think again about your husband.
Yes, that is so true. It's brought it all back. But wonderful, wonderful memories. And
talk to me more about Chuck Larson, because I covered him some when he was superintendent of the Naval Academy. That was a tough time. He was, what, the second youngest four-star admiral in the U.S. Navy at the time. He went from being a pilot to a sub-commander. I haven't heard of anyone who's done something like that. What a career.
Yeah, he had a fantastic career. Slightly different. I come from a Navy family, and my side of the Navy family, they were all aviators, and Chuck was an aviator when I married him. And then he comes home one day and says, guess what? I'm going submarines. And wow, okay. And so we just had this incredibly wonderful adventure together for 53 years. And it was an adventure and a wonderful one.
I have two questions. Number one, when you learned that Senator McCain chose to be laid to rest next to your husband, I mean, first of all, how did you learn that, and what was your reaction?
Actually, Chuck came home one day and he said, I picked out my grave, and I went, oh, okay. And you know, when you do that kind of thing 20-some years ago, you don't think that's ever going to happen. So I kind of nonchalantly said, oh, that's fine, good. And he says, and by the way, John's going to be next to me. And I went, oh, okay. But you think that's that was 20-some years ago. So, and then all of a sudden it hit that, oh my goodness, we are next. They will be next to each other, and it's kind of cute as somebody said. Chuck has his wingman back now.
Yes.
Wingman, 20 years in the planning. And you said you knew John McCain before you even met your husband. What was that John McCain like way back then? You have the dirt.
Fun.
Oh my goodness.
A lot of fun.
A lot of fun. In fact, I guess, and I'm not quite sure how that worked. I was at the College of William and Mary, and John would come up and pick me up, and I would go down to Norfolk to his party house. And I found out later that John was sort of checking me out for Chuck, which
Screening
really
you.
Yeah, he was
did not
doing the
make me
screening process.
happy at the time. But they were such good friends, I guess they were checking each other's girlfriends out.
Well, and you obviously passed.
Yeah.
My goodness. Well, clearly both John McCain and Admiral Larson had terrific taste. So we are lucky for that, and I'm sure
I
you're
agree.
both grateful.
Yeah.
Grateful for that. Sarah Larson, Erica Larson, Kristen Larson Dadko, thanks so much for being with us. It's been a really nice discussion.
Thank you
sharing
for having me.
Thank you for
your
having
memories.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you
She
so
said Chuck
much.
has his wingman back. That is so profound to me.
I had no idea this was 20 years. This was 20 years in the making that these two great Navy men decided 20 years ago they wanted to be side by side.
That's really beautiful.